Hello viewers, welcome back to our series of lectures on the topic absorption spectra. Today we will try to continue our discussion on UV visible spectroscopy. And in this process we will focus attention on to the factors that affect UV visible spectrum. The session is planned as follows, that is, to begin with we will try to recall what we have done so far. Thereafter we will talk about factors which affect UV visible spectrum, and we will discuss in detail about conjugation. Then thereafter we will talk about the effect of solvent on UV visible spectrum, and then we will talk about how do the substituents affect UV visible spectrum, and having done all that we will sum up what we do in today's session. So, that is a kind of an outline we have for today. Okay. Let us see where we are, what is the story so far. The story so far is that what we started with was we talked about spectroscopy to be the study of interaction of radiation and matter. Having done that, we came down to that EM radiation happens to be some kind of an oscillatory electrical and magnetic fields which are oscillating perpendicular to each other and also perpendicular to the direction of propagation, and EM radiation is characterized in terms of wavelength, frequency and wave number, etc. So, we talked about spectroscopy as interaction of radiation and matter. We talked about what is EM radiation. Thereafter, we recalled for ourselves that the molecular energies are quantized, and we talked about this kind of energy level diagram wherein we showed that the electronic energy levels are quantized, so are vibration energy levels, and then these are the smaller ones are the rotation energy levels there. And in the context of UV visible spectroscopy, what basically happens is this radiation in this UV visible range, that is from about 200 nanometers to 800 nanometers, that causes transitions amongst the electronic energy levels. You can see from here. So, from this level we are going to this level over there, and in this process what you get is an outcome comes as a spectrum there, and the spectrum comes out, it is a typical spectrum I am trying to show you here, and the spectra is characterized in terms of the position where the bands are coming there, and of course, the intensity part of it, what is the intensity of signal, that means to what extent a given radiation is absorbed or so on and so forth. And then of course, we did talk about that what is the width of the band we are talking about, or what you observe in the spectrum there. Thereafter, we talked about that the position of the bands in the spectrum is determined by the difference in the energy levels over there. So, this is a typical energy level diagram. So, if the transition happens to be between say these two energy levels with the delta E happens to be lesser, so the signal will come at a higher wavelength, because we know that the energy and wavelength are inversely related over there. Thereafter, we talked about that this electronic energy levels which we are talking about in the context of electronic spectroscopy or the UV visible spectroscopy, these are obtained by molecular orbital treatment of the molecule, and typical energy level diagrams look something like this. That is, we got sigma, pi, n, pi star and sigma star, and that is a typical energy level kind of a sequence also, the kind of order of energies is in this form. And then when the molecule is there, the different electrons of the molecules are distributed amongst these energy levels, and we find that some of the energy levels will be filled, some will be remaining vacant over there. The highest orbital which is filled is called as HOMO, and the lowest orbital which is unfilled is called as LUMO, and typically the transitions occur from HOMO to LUMO. That is all what we have done so far. Let us move further from here and then see what are the factors that affect UV visible spectrum. And the factors there are the three important factors. They are the conjugation in the molecule, second happens to be the solvent, the nature of solvent, whether it is polar or non-polar otherwise, and then the substituents there. So, these three factors basically primarily affect the position of the absorption band, because basically what happens is that we will discuss in detail about all of this. These factors actually alter the energy levels. So, since they alter the energy levels, so the delta E will change, the position of spectrum band will change. So, that is how these factors are going to cause effect in the UV visible spectrum there. Let us take up each one of them one by one. Let us begin with the conjugation in the molecule. We all know that conjugation basically refers to the delocalization of pi electrons of two alternating unsaturated bonds there. Suppose you got a double bond here and there is a single bond, another double bond over there. So, if you have got that kind of alternation, then these alternating double bonds will undergo some kind of a delocalization, and that is basically referred to as conjugation. Now, conjugation, we will take up two cases here. One, conjugation in case of alkenes. Then we will talk about conjugation in carbonyl compounds there. Now, let us see how does conjugation affect the absorption spectrum in case of alkenes. Look at this picture here. So, what we basically am trying to show you here is, I am trying to show you the energy level diagrams and the corresponding transition between them in three different molecules here. This is ethylene, this is buta-1,3-diene, and then we got hexa-1,3,5-triene. Let us see what do we have here. What do we have here is that in case of ethylene, since there is only one double bond here, so there will be two pi molecular orbitals, say pi 1 and pi 2. This is bonding, this is anti-bonding, and the two electrons will be filled into the pi 1 orbital here. And the transition which will take place from this level to this is by HOMO here, this is LUMO, and this transition happens to be of certain delta E value, which corresponds to a wavelength of 171 nanometers. That is where the absorption band will come for ethylene. But that is not of much interest to us, because that falls in the far UV region there. But now, if I go to a molecule like buta-1,3-diene, what you find is we have got two double bonds which can conjugate. When they can conjugate, what you find is that we get 4 molecular orbitals, and they are termed as pi 1, pi 2, pi 3 and pi 4. And the 4 electrons, the electrons in the p orbitals here will be filled into pi 1 and pi 2. So, this pi 2 happens to be my HOMO here, and the transition will be from pi 2 to pi 3, and this transition is of delta E value which is lesser than that in case of ethylene here. So, as a consequence, our lambda max now shifts to a higher wavelength, it comes at about 217 nanometers. So, there is a shift because of the delta E value has decreased. Now, let us move further, let us go to another molecule here, wherein there are 3 double bonds which can conjugate, say hexa-1,3,5-triene. In this case, since there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of carbon atoms, each with a p orbital on that. So, when they kind of undergo conjugation, or if you try to generate molecular orbitals for that, we find that there will be 6 molecular orbitals, that will be pi 1, pi 2, pi 3, pi 4, pi 5 and pi 6. I am referring to only the pi orbitals. There will be sigma orbitals below that we are not concerned about in this context here. So, here again we find that these 3 orbitals will be filled, and the transition will take place from pi 3 to pi 4, and this happens to be of a still lower energy as compared to the value buta-diene or in case of ethylene. So, if I say go to octatetraene and so on and so forth, what I will find is that this gap between HOMO and LUMO goes on decreasing. So, what happens is, since with conjugation the delta E value is decreasing, the transition, the energy of that delta E value is decreasing, so thereby the lambda max will increase. So, that is a general effect of conjugation in case of alkenes. Let us look at another kind of molecules, say carbonyl compounds. In case of carbonyl compounds, I am taking 2 systems here. One is simple acetone here. In case of acetone, the molecular orbital energy level diagrams looks different from what we had in case of alkenes. What do we have here is, we will have sigma, pi, and there is a non-bonding orbital here. Then we got pi star and sigma star. And of course, when you fill the electrons, so this sigma is filled, so is pi, so is n. And the possible transitions in this case will be from n to pi star and from pi to pi star, and they typically come at 195 nanometers and 274 nanometers. So, that is about our acetone molecule. Now, when we have got a molecule of this kind, wherein there is a double bond here which can conjugate with this carbonyl group, what happens to our molecular orbital energy diagram? Let us look at that. What you see is that this remains more or less unchanged, but the energy of this pi orbital here becomes slightly more than that in case of acetone here. This is the effect of conjugation. Non-bonding does not change much, and this pi star becomes more stable, and this is significantly more stable than this is unstable here. So, what you find is that these molecular orbital energy levels, the energies of these levels has changed. As a consequence, the transition which will take place will be the same. That will be, we will be having n to pi star, we will be having pi to pi star, but the position, because the delta E value have now changed, as a consequence the positions will be different, both of them. So, from this 195 it has become 203, from 274 it has become 331. That is, because of conjugation, both the transitions move to higher wavelength, or they are of basically lower energy there. So, what do we conclude from here? What do we conclude is that the conjugation raises the energy of HOMO and lowers the energy of LUMO orbitals, and as a consequence lesser energy is required for the transitions, and as a result of that the lambda max increases. That is the effect of conjugation on the UV visible spectrum. Typically, if you look at the molecules wherein there is a possibility of conjugation, we will going to have lambda max to be higher than that of unconjugated molecules, and this is what we are going to use UV visible spectroscopy qualitatively speaking. One more point I would like to make in the context of this conjugation here is that suppose I take two situations here. This is a simple molecule pent 1 in. In case of pent 1 in, there is only isolated double bond over there, and if I got two more molecules here, this is pent 1 3 diene, and there is a possibility of conjugation. Or if I take pent 1 4 diene, there is no possibility of conjugation because the double bond is farther away from this. So, what you find is the lambda max values, say in this case there are two double bonds there, but they are unconjugated. The lambda max does not change significantly at all. On the contrary, if there is a possibility of conjugation, we find that lambda max shifts significantly from 176 we come down to 223, which is a significant change. So, that point has to be kept in mind, that isolated double bonds will not lead to any change in the lambda max, significant change in that, whereas conjugated ones are going to affect that. In fact, this concept of color also is related to the conjugation in molecules. Let's see what is color. Color basically is a psychological sensation that happens when the light of a certain wavelength, typically in the visible range, say from 400 to 800 nanometer, that falls on the retina of our eyes, and that actually causes some kind of a conformational changes in the molecule called as rhodopsin molecule, which is present in the rods and cone cells of the retina. And this conformational change actually brings in or triggers some kind of a nerve impulse that actually is perceived in our brain as the color. So, that is the basic physiology, so to say, of the color. But in terms of our spectroscopy or spectrum point of view, let us see what kind of color do we see. The color what we see actually depends on the light what is coming to our eyes there, and we all know that typically the white light is composed of all the wavelengths of the light in the visible range. That means, we have the whole spectrum WebGeoR here, all put together, they will combine together to give me white light there. But what happens is, when this white light falls on an object, that object may partly absorb part of the light here and rest gets reflected there, which falls on our eyes, and that is the one which falls on the eyes and is perceived as some kind of a color there. So, what happens is that there is a correlation between the whole white light is a very bigger spectrum there, part of the spectrum has been absorbed, whatever is left out that combines together to give me the color of the molecule there, what I see as color there, and this gives me a concept of what is called as a complementary colors. So, typically this is called as color wheel, so to say. Now, suppose a given molecule absorbs radiation in the region of say 650 nanometers, say it absorbs a red part of the spectrum, the color which the eye will be seeing will be this one. Okay. If the yellow is absorbed, I will see it blue, if this is absorbed, I will see the green color, and so on. So, there is a concept of complementarity in that. Okay. So, the basic requirement is the molecule must absorb in the visible region to be colored. If any molecule does not absorb in the visible region, it will not be colored. So, that is the bottom line here. Okay. So, how does our conjugation comes into picture? The conjugation comes into picture in the following way. This basically tells us that if I go on extending conjugation, we started with ethylene 171 nanometers, butadiene 217, hexatriene 258, I continue making the chain longer and longer. I find that the moment you have sufficiently long chain, the lambda max can come at a range greater than 400 nanometer, which is the visible range, and the molecule will become colored. This may not be colored, this will be colored, so on and so forth. Now, let us take typical examples here. Lycopene. Lycopene is a molecule which is responsible for the red color of tomatoes. This is a structure of lycopene here, there is a spectrum of it. The structure shows us that there are a total of 11 double bonds are there which are conjugated. Because of this extensive conjugation here, we find that the lambda max comes far above 400 nanometers. That's a kind of typical spectrum we have there. That is why this molecule is red, because it is absorbing in the visible region. Let's take another example, say of beta carotene that is found in the carrots there. Here again, incidentally, the beta carotene also has got about 11 double bonds here which are conjugated. The difference between the two is because of the other components in the molecule over there. So, what basically we wanted to convey here is that the conjugation in a given molecule can make the molecule colored. So, that is a kind of correlation we have. I think it is time to talk about, since we are talking about color, it will be worthwhile to talk about a simple concept of chromophore and auxochrome here. Basically, chromophore is that part of the molecule which is responsible for absorption of the UV visible radiation there. Typically, in case of say lycopene, that 11 bonds I am talking about, that is a conjugated part, that is a chromophore here. The example I am giving here is of say disperse orange 3 is a dye. In this case, you find that the part in this enclosed part over here, you find that there are this double bond here, single bond, double bond, single bond, and it will continue double bond, single, double, single, double, single, double, single, it will continue. That's a chromophore we have. So, since this is an extended conjugation here, so this part of the molecule which will be able to absorb radiation in the UV visible range will be called as the chromophore there. And second component of the molecule is that which are the certain groups which are attached to the chromophore and they affect the lambda max of the chromophore. Suppose that this nitro group and amino group is not there, this molecule will have certain color because of the chromophore there. But because of the presence of these two groups here, a nitro group here and amino group here, we find the color changes that can change in terms of the lambda max shifting there, lambda max can increase or decrease, or maybe even the intensity of the spectrum can increase or decrease. So, such groups which cause these changes are called as auxochromes. Some examples we can take here, say we have got benzene here. So, benzene has lambda max of 255, but if I take phenol with an OH group over here, the lambda max is 270. In case of aniline, it happens to be 280 nanometers. So, we find that the presence of auxochromes, typically they must have lone pairs on them. With the presence of lone pairs there, we find that this lone pair interacts with the chromophore here. The chromophore here is just these 3 bonds over there which are conjugated. So, with this addition of this lone pair into the conjugation here, we find that lambda max shifts, which you can see it very clearly over here. However, nowadays this concept of auxochrome is obsolete, because this is an old theory which was proposed by Otto Witt way back in 19th century. But nowadays the modern view is this, that this auxochrome, since it is the electrons of the auxochromes are getting into conjugation or some kind of interaction with the chromophore, so they actually become part of the new chromophore itself. So, this concept actually is obsolete, but it is still being used. That is why I talked about the concept of auxochromes there. Now, let us see in what possible ways can auxochromes affect the UV visible spectrum. Look at this picture here. So, this is my typical UV visible spectrum here, and if it so happens that the auxochrome is such that makes the lambda max, this is my lambda max over here, suppose that lambda max shifts to higher wavelength there, this is called as bathochromic shift or the red shift here, because you can see it from here, that is the wavelength now shifts more towards the red, it becomes higher now. Other possibility is certain auxochromes, what they can do is they can decrease the wavelength, and such a group will be called as causing hypsochromic shift there or a blue shift over there. In certain auxochromes, what can happen is we find that the intensity of this band increases. This is called as hyperchromic effect. Hyper is higher, it increases the intensity, and certain auxochromes can actually decrease this, that is called as a hypochromic effect. So, there are 4 kind of ways in which auxochromes can affect our UV visible spectrum of a given molecule there. Now, let us move further. Having talked about conjugation in detail, let us move further and talk about what is the effect of solvent on UV visible spectrum here. That actually depends on the nature of solvent I am trying to talk about. And typically, we have got 2 kinds of solvents. We have got polar solvents, we have got non-polar solvents there. Look at the polar solvents. The polar solvents like water, etc., water, alcohol, they act actually by stabilizing or destabilizing the molecular orbitals, because we have molecular orbitals, the transition is taking place. Now, suppose I bring in the solvent. When I bring in the solvent, it may so happen the solvent interacts with say the starting molecular orbital, or say the HOMO or the LUMO. So, as a consequence of that, since because of interaction this energy can increase or decrease, thereby this delta E value will change. When the delta E value changes, the spectrum will get affected there. So, that is the way typically the solvents come into picture. Let us look at this. They can interact with the ground state as I mentioned, or they can interact with the excited state. Spectrum typically in the polar solvents may vary from that in the non-polar solvents, because polar solvents have got more tendency to interact with the energy levels than the non-polar ones. Let us see that. Now, let us look at the effect of a polar solvent on different types of transitions. Let us begin with talking about pi to pi star transition, which is one of the very common transitions we have in case of UV visible here. In this case, what happens is the excited pi star state is more polar than the ground state. Let us look at this picture here. What we have is basically in case of pi to pi star transition, we have pi orbital, we got pi star here. And if you look at the molecular orbitals of these two, this molecular orbital is more polar, so to say. That means, if the electron is occupying this level, the molecule will be more polar there. So, when I bring in a polar solvent like water or alcohol, what will happen is that polar solvent will interact more favorably with pi star than with pi. They will interact with both of them. This will be stabilized to a certain extent, this will be stabilized much more than that. So, as a consequence, what happens is that this delta E value decreases. If this is my initial delta E value, so this will correspond to certain lambda max here. When the delta E value decreases, lambda max shifts to higher wavelength there. I mean, it will cause a red shift there. Okay. So, that is the effect of solvent, a polar solvent on pi to pi star transition. Let us look at the effect on N to pi star transition. In case of N to pi star transition, the energy level diagram is like this. We got a N, we got pi star there, and when I bring in the solvent, typically the solvent will form hydrogen bonds with the ground state more easily than with the excited state, because there is a lone pair available there. So, the ground state, that is an N orbital, will be stabilized more than the pi star there. So, as a consequence, what you find is that this delta E value is increased as compared to that of the initial value over here, and as a consequence, what you find is that there will be a blue shift there, the wavelength will be decreasing over there. Let us look at some pictures there. This is a spectrum of acetone in two different solvents there. So, what you find is that this is my spectrum in hexane, and when I move from hexane to water, we find that this shifts to lower wavelength there. That is a blue shift coming over there. That is one typical example of a polar solvent affecting the lambda max of a given UV visible band in the spectrum. Okay. Now, suppose I change the solvent from a non-polar to a polar solvent. What is the outcome of that? Let us look at this picture here. This is a spectrum in isooctane. We find that oxooctane basically is a non-polar solvent. In case of non-polar solvent, there is no interaction with the pi or pi star orbitals there. So, as a consequence, we get a reasonably good band spectrum over here. But the moment I bring in say ethanol, ethanol happens to be a polar solvent, and because of the polar solvent coming into picture, we find that this kind of a fine structure is lost in that. That is another way of looking at the effect of changing solvents from polar to non-polar or otherwise. Okay. Now, that is basically we talked about the effect of polar solvents. Now, look at the non-polar solvent. Non-polar solvent, as I mentioned earlier also, typically they normally do not interact with the solute molecules in the ground or in the excited state. As a consequence, the spectrum what I get is similar to what we get in the gaseous phase of the compound, and that spectrum is I just showed you earlier also, that is a typical spectrum with a beautiful band spectrum shown over there. There is no loss in the structure over there because of the solvent in this case. Okay. Now, let us move further and talk about the effect of substituents on the UV visible spectrum here. Substituents they also affect the UV visible spectrum, and they play a role in determining the lambda max for them, because this is again we are going to use later on to qualitatively predict the lambda max value of a given molecule. And actually what they do is this basically affect the chromophore, because we have a chromophore in the molecule which is absorbing. Okay. And these substituents actually modify this chromophore. It's different from oxochromes. Oxochromes contribute by giving in their lone pairs, they are different. So, these substituents, what they do is they alter the energy levels to some extent, very not as significantly as an oxochrome does. And as a consequence, what happens is, let us look at this. So, one typical example is a methyl group here. Methyl group actually, suppose I got, this is my unsaturated molecule there, say ethylene here. Now, we find that if I got a methyl substituent on that, this methyl substituent, this is my CH bond of methyl group. This CH can interact with this pi orbitals over here by what is called as hyperconjugation or no bond resonance. And as a consequence of that, this is the participation of say sigma orbitals here into the pi, and as a consequence we find that the lambda max shifts not as significantly, but this effect is much weaker than that in case of conjugation, but it is a effect which is there in the molecules, because you may have a number of substituents, each contributing a few nanometers will add up to give me a significant effect. So, they are not to be ignored, they are important, but not as significant as the other, as is the effect of conjugation or oxochromes. Okay. Now, let us try to sum up what we have done today. What we have done today is we kind of reviewed the contents of the previous sessions. Thereafter, we discussed the effect of conjugation in reasonable detail on the UV visible spectrum. And in this context, we talked about effect of conjugation in case of alkenes and thereafter in ketonic compounds and all. Then we explained the concept of color and related it to the conjugation in the molecules. Having done that, we moved on to discussing a very important concept, what is called as a chromophore oxochrome concept or chromophore oxochrome theory, which basically relates empirically the color with molecular structure there. And then we talked about the effect of oxochromes on the absorption maxima, and lastly we did talk about the effect of solvent and substituents on the UV visible spectrum of a given molecule. In the next session, we will take up the quantitative aspect of UV visible spectroscopy. That means, how do we represent that quantitatively, and then what kind of information we can get regarding the kind of interactions we have between the molecules, and variety of applications we have for that. That will be taking up in the next session there. Thank you.